Rajni is the founder and curator of the Ahimsa Conversations, an online platform for exploring the possibilities of nonviolence. She is formerly the Gandhi Peace Fellow at Gateway House, Indian Council on Global Relations. Her journalism has appeared in many English and Hindi newspapers and magazines. She has written many books, including Bapu Kuti. Rajni को मैं परिचय संक्षेप में ये कहूंगी कि पत्रकार और लेखक केवल नहीं है, ये बहुत बड़े एक आंदोलनकारी भी है और हमारे साथ बहुत सारे लोगों के साथ बहुत सालों से जूझ रही है। आज रजनी हमारे इस पूरे चर्चा का मॉडरेशन करेंगी। हर्ष के परिचय देना जरूरत बिल्कुल भी नहीं है, मगर फिर भी मैं सोचती हूँ कुछ सीमित दायरे में मैं उनका परिचय पहले अंग्रेजी में फिर हिंदी में दूंगी। Harsh is a human rights and peace worker, a writer, a columnist, a researcher and teacher. He works with survivors of mass violence, hunger, the homeless and street children. Harsh was formerly in the IAS in the Madhya Pradesh and what is now the Chhattisgarh cadre for almost 2 decades. He writes and speaks regularly on issues of social justice. He received the Rajiv Gandhi National Sadbhavana Award for peace work, the M.A. Thomas National Human Rights Award 2002, and the Chishti Harmony Award in 2012. He also started the Karwan-e-Mohabbat campaign in solidarity with the victims of communal or religiously motivated violence. I could read for half an hour about Harsh, but I won't do that. I'll stop giving at this point after having given a very short biography of Harsh for everyone to understand how relevant he is to the conversation today. हर्ष मंदर एक आईएएस कर्मचारी भी थे, अधिकारी भी थे। 20 साल बाद उन्होंने नौकरी छोड़ी और वो बहुत सारे मानवाधिकार और मानवता के मुद्दे पे जुड़े रहे हैं। उन्होंने जो बेघर बच्चे हैं उनके लिए और बिल्कुल बड़े पैमाने में जो हिंसा हुआ है जिसको पार कर लोग बच गए हैं उनके लिए कई सारी चीजों के लिए काम किया है। वो राजीव गांधी नेशनल सद्भावना अवार्ड उनको दिया गया है, एम.ए. थॉमस नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स अवार्ड भी मिला है, चिश्ती हार्मनी अवार्ड भी मिला है और वो आज 2-4 साल में कारवां-ए-मोहब्बत जो बहुत ही बड़ा एक अभियान था उसको लेके जो इस तरीके के भेदभाव और खासकर धार्मिक भेदभाव से मारे गए हैं या जिन पर हिंसा हुआ है उनके साथ बात करने के लिए और एक सद्भावना के लिए और शांति के लिए बात करने के लिए गए हैं। सईदा हमीद पुरानी दोस्त है, सब जानते हैं सईदा को। इस देश में कई सारे मुद्दों के लिए आगे होके पहल करके काम की हैं। वो भारत के सोशल और विमेन्स राइट्स की जो एक्टिविस्ट हैं उनमें से बहुत प्रमुख हैं। एक एजुकेशनिस्ट भी हैं, एक लेखक हैं और प्लानिंग कमीशन के वो मेंबर भी रह चुकी हैं। वो कमिटी ऑफ द कमीशन ऑन हेल्थ की स्टीयरिंग कमेटी की अध्यक्षा भी रही हैं। उसने नेशनल हेल्थ पॉलिसी 2002 में वापस हमारे सामने लेके आई हैं। जब तक 2015 में वो स्थगित नहीं किया तब तक काम करी। सईदा हमीद विमेन्स इनिशिएटिव फॉर पीस इन साउथ एशिया की भी फाउंडर ट्रस्टी हैं। वो सेंटर फॉर डायलॉग एंड रिकंसिलिएशन की भी मेंबर हैं। नेशनल कमीशन ऑफ विमेन की भी मेंबर रह चुकी हैं। उनको वो मौलाना आजाद नेशनल उर्दू यूनिवर्सिटी की चांसलर भी रह चुकी हैं। उनको पद्मश्री 2007 में उनको दिया गया है अब इस समाज के लिए जो सेवा की है उसके लिए। मगर ये सब सईदा का परिभाषा नहीं है, उनकी पहचान नहीं है। Syeda has remained one of the most persistent voices for the people who are downtrodden, for the people who are victims of violence, and I really am terribly happy that Syeda is with us here today. S.M Vijayanand is a 1981 batch IAS officer. He was formerly Chief Secretary of Kerala. He was also the Secretary Rural Development Government of India. He, as the chairman of the Kerala Institute of Local Administration, he played a major role in the efforts at decentralization of power in the state of Kerala through the Panchayati Raj system. He's a former chief secretary. He's on many committees and commissions, including the Finance Commission of Kerala. और लेखक भी हैं, विजय IAS ऑफिसर भी हैं, ये चीफ सेक्रेटरी थे केरल के। और ये जो उनका जो पीपल्स प्लान है जिसको नाम से हम पहचानते हैं, जिसमें विकेंद्रीकरण का एक प्रतीक बन गया है ना केवल केरल में, पूरे दुनिया में, उस विकेंद्रीकरण के पद्धति में उसको आगे ले जाने के लिए उन्होंने बहुत मेहनत किया है। वो गांधीवादी भी हैं और मानते हैं कि गांव में तरक्की नहीं होगी तो दूसरी जगह तरक्की होने का कोई मतलब नहीं है। आई वेलकम यंग सुमनस। सुमनस एक स्वराज से प्रेरित होकर उन्होंने पूरा अहिंसा के और समाज में एक तर्क के लिए काम किया है। सुमनस के जो नाना नानी दादा दादी थे, उन्होंने जनपद सेवा ट्रस्ट एक मेलकोट में 1960 में शुरू किया। वो डॉक्टरल थीसिस उन्होंने खत्म किया, डेवलपमेंट इज स्वराज एंड द क्वेस्ट फॉर अ नॉन वायलेंट सोशल ऑर्डर, यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ ससेक्स में, यूके में कुछ समय पहले। उनको स्वराज का जो विचार है, वो जो मुद्दा है, वो उनको बहुत अच्छा लगता है कि वो समाज में हो और एक व्यक्ति के बारे में हो जो एक संतुलित जीवन जी सके पर्यावरण के साथ और लोगों के साथ। उनको लगता है कि जो विकास के जितने भी मॉडल बने हैं, उन मॉडल को और भी ठीक करके उसमें गांधी की विचारधारा को लाना बहुत जरूरी है। So Sumanas, I welcome you. I've introduced you all in a jumble of Hindi and English because our viewers are from both language groups. And I welcome you today as a young person who has come to this discussion. And many of us hope that the youth of India will lead the new dialogue and the new conversation about Gandhi, about non-violence, and about Satyagraha. And I'm really glad you've joined us. Now I hand over this meeting to Rajni to carry forward, but before that, there'll be just a small 1-minute video, and after that, Rajni will take the evening forward.
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम। सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति।
Aruna, should I start?
Yes, Rajni, will you please take over, my dear?
Okay. So नमस्कार सभी को, मेरा नमस्कार और मेरा प्रणाम। अरुणा जी, SFD, सभी साथियों को बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया कि आपने मुझे इसमें शामिल किया। It's truly an honor to share this platform with all of you and our 4 friends who will be the speakers. So my job really is just to be the sutradhar, but I will take my 2-3 minutes, the privilege I've been given, just to share with you 2 things. One, that ये हम जानते हैं, ज्यादातर कई लोग जानते हैं कि गांधी जी के आखिरी 10 महीने जो उनकी जिंदगी के गुजरे, उसमें वो खुद अपने अहिंसा के प्रयास के बारे में बहुत निराश हो गए। उन्होंने अपने आखिरी जन्मदिन 2 अक्टूबर की जो प्रार्थना सभा थी, उसमें उन्होंने कहा कि अब मैं 125 साल नहीं जीना चाहता। नेचुरली, मतलब जो पार्टीशन का हादसा था, जिस कदर हिंसा भड़की, बिल्कुल स्वाभाविक था कि वो इतने दुख में थे सभी की तरह, और उनको तो और भी ज्यादा था। लेकिन जो बात यहाँ हमारे इस आज की सभा में बहुत गंभीरता से दोहराने लायक है कि उन्हें अहिंसा के आदर्श और उसकी संभावना, मतलब उसकी प्रैक्टिकल संभावना पे बिल्कुल एक रत्ती भर उनको शक नहीं हुआ, और वो यही कहते हुए चले गए, he kept saying to the very end that my experiment may have failed but ahimsa will triumph. और इसको कितना लोगों की आत्मा को इस बात ने छुआ था, मैं आपको बस एक वाक्य बताना चाहती हूँ बिफोर वी मूव ऑन। एक अमेरिकन जर्नलिस्ट थे, शीन, वो मौजूद थे उस दिन 30 जनवरी को जब गांधी जी को गोली लगी, और वो उस ट्रेन में ट्रेवल किए जो गाड़ी उन गांधी जी के अस्थि कलश को लेकर इलाहाबाद जा रही थी। और उनका जो विवरण है उस जर्नी का, उस यात्रा का, कि ना केवल स्टेशंस पे लोग मतलब लाखों की भीड़ उस अस्थि कलश के दर्शन करने आई, पर वो कहता है कि रास्तों में जहां खाली खेत थे, खाली जमीन थी, कोई शहर नहीं था, कोई गांव नहीं था, लोग, हिंदुस्तान के लोग पटरी किनारे रुक के खड़े थे केवल उस ट्रेन का एक दर्शन करने के लिए। ये था आलम, ये था गांधी जी का प्रभाव। तो आज के बहुत दुखदाई माहौल में मुझे लगा कि ये वाक्य दोहराना हम सबके लिए एक उत्साह वापस जोड़ने वाला है। तो ऑन दैट नोट, it's a very, very big honor, Harsh, to share this platform with you. And can I now invite you, please, to share your thoughts with us? The plan is that all the speakers speak for about 10 minutes each in this round. And then we'll have another round. And then hopefully we will have some time. कुछ समय हम जो अपने साथी आज जमा हुए हैं, उनसे उनको प्रश्न उठाने का और अपनी बात भी आपसे कहने का फिर मौका रहेगा। So Harsh, over to you.
Thank you, Rajni. Thank you, Aruna, and thank you all friends who have gathered here today. आप सबके चेहरों को देखते हुए ही एक हौसला बढ़ता है। गांधी जी को सारी जिंदगी जब से होश संभाला हूँ कई बार याद आते हैं, लेकिन पिछले कुछ 7-10 सालों में मुझे लगता है कि बहुत ज़्यादा याद आने लगे हैं। और उसका कारण ये है कि जिन मूल्यों के लिए उन्होंने अपनी ज़िंदगी, अब उनके ज़िंदगी के जो संघर्ष थे और कई चीज़ों के लिए वो लड़े, लेकिन एक चीज़ के लिए उन्होंने अपनी जान दी, और वो हमें भूलना नहीं चाहिए कि वो क्या था। वो इस सिद्धांत के लिए, I mean, he lived for many causes, but he died for one particular cause. And in that, I think India is at this moment betraying that cause every day. This was, and and also to remember, I think there are many things in Gandhiji's life that inspires us. But what was, I think, the most wonderful period of his life, the most inspiring, were the last months of his life, about which Rajni also spoke. Think of a situation that, the country has been torn apart. There are a million people who have died in Hindu and Muslim riots in many parts of the country. About 14 million people at least were displaced from their homes, the biggest displacement in human history. My own family was among them. तो ऐसे हालत में जब खून की नदियां बह रही थी, नफरत एक चरम सीमा तक पहुंच गई थी और मजहब के आधार पे एक देश का निर्माण भी उन खून की नदियों के बीच से हुआ। ऐसे वक्त में बहुत आसान था, बहुत दबाव भी था ये कहने के लिए कि मुसलमानों के लिए पाकिस्तान देश बना है, तो जो इंडिया होगा, हिंदुस्तान होगा, ये हिंदुओं का देश होगा। ये आसान था, दबाव था। और मुझे लगता है कि गांधी जी मतलब पीढ़ी दर पीढ़ी हम हिंदुस्तानियों को, हम भारत के लोगों को ये this gratitude that we are still in a country that we can be proud of. His imagination for India was that this would be a humane, inclusive, egalitarian country where people of every faith and the absence of it, every caste, every gender, every language, every ethnicity, everybody was welcome to live in India, own India, as equal citizens. And that was very important. I mean, that they would live as equal citizens. Nehruji was once asked, I think in 46, who does India belong to? And he said, India belongs to those who choose to make India their own. And it's, sitting in Germany these days and trying to understand what happened in Nazi times, I realize exactly at the same time, when Europe was being torn apart by a war that took 60 million lives, where Holocaust was executed, where on the basis of religion, 6 million Jews were slaughtered. In those times, we had Mahatma Gandhi who taught us that we fought for freedom for all. And there are many stories told. I'll recount a couple of them from my portion of where I wanted to take this conversation. Anis Kidwai, in her memoirs, Anis Kidwai के जो हस्बैंड थे वो कांग्रेस के कार्यकर्ता थे और लोगों की जिंदगी बचाने में दंगों के दौरान उनकी जान चली गई और वो अपनी इद्दत भी पूरा किए बिना वो गांधी जी के पास पहुंचे दिल्ली में और उन्होंने कहा कि मैं कुछ अपने देश के लिए इस वक्त जो भी आप कहेंगे मुझे करना है। तो उन्होंने कहा कि गांधी जी बहुत उदास थे और उन्होंने कहा कि और इट्स अ वेरी सिंपल लाइन, ही सेड मेरा काम तब तक पूरा नहीं होगा जब तक एक मुस्लिम बच्चा बिना डर के इस शहर में, इस देश में घूम ना सके, तब तक मेरा काम पूरा नहीं होगा। और आज हम देखते हैं कि इतना डर का माहौल है हमारे मुस्लिम भाई बहन और बच्चों के लिए कि आप मुस्लिम आकार हो तो आपके ऊपर कोई लिंच करके आपको ट्रेन में मार सकता है, कोई वो बच्चा जाता है पानी पीने एक मंदिर में तो उसको पीट के जो हालत हो जाती है। तो ऐसे वक्त में गांधी जी एक्चुअली उनका एक जो तालिस्मान है हम लोग कभी कभी याद करते हैं लेकिन पालन नहीं करते हैं, वो था कि जब आप दुविधा में हों तो उस सबसे कमजोर, सबसे शोषित इंसान को याद करिए और सोचिए कि जो हम करने जा रहे हैं क्या उनके काम उनकी जिंदगी को बेहतर कर पाएगा। ये एक तालिस्मान था। लेकिन एक दूसरा तालिस्मान जो अनीस किदवाई ने बताया कि हम ऐसा देश बनाएं जहाँ पे एक मुस्लिम बच्चा बिना डर के इस घूम सके, बस इतनी सी बात। और ये दो वेरी सिंपल dreams that he had for India and how far we have gone from both of them is what I would like to say. And how do you fight, I mean how do you fight hate? I think जो नफरत की बात थी, ये दूसरी बात है जो उन्होंने हमें बताया कि नफरत से कैसे लड़ते हैं। और जिस वक्त आज़ादी हमें मिली वो दिल्ली में नहीं थे, हम लोग जानते हैं, वो कलकत्ते में थे। यहाँ हिंसा बहुत मतलब रोज कत्लेआम चल रहा था। तो गांधी जी ने उपवास रखा और कहा कि जब तक अंतिम हिंसा की घटना खत्म नहीं हो तब तक मैं एक अनाज नहीं खाऊंगा। और बताया जाता है कि एक हिंदू आदमी आए थे उनके पास, बहुत नाराज थे और उनके मुंह पे उन्होंने रोटी फेंकी और कहा कि जो आप कर रहे हैं बहुत गलत कर रहे हैं। तो गांधी जी ने पूछा क्यों? तो उन्होंने कहा कि मेरा इतना सा छोटा सा बच्चा था और उसे मुसलमानों की भीड़ ने उसकी कत्ल कर दी। तो मैं कैसे अपनी नफरत पे काबू कर सकूं? तो गांधी ने कहा कि मैं आपका दर्द को तो समझता हूं, लेकिन एक रास्ता बताता हूं। एक छोटा सा बच्चा ऐसे ढूंढिए, इतना छोटा बच्चा, एक मुस्लिम बच्चा जिनके माँ बाप को हिंदुओं की भीड़ ने कत्ल किया है, और उसे तुम गोद लो और अपना बच्चा मानो, उसके अपने दीन में उसको बड़ा करो, और शायद आपको अपने दर्द से, दुख से, आक्रोश से आपको काबू करने की शक्ति मिले। और एक आखिरी उदाहरण मैं देना चाह रहा था जो हम उनसे सीख सकते हैं। His last fast, the last fast that Gandhiji had was 2 weeks before he was killed. And there were 3 demands that he made. उनके जो आखिरी जो उपवास था, मरने के 2 हफ्ते, मारे जाने के 2 हफ्ते पहले, उनके 3 मांगे थी। एक, हम लोग कई बार जानते हैं कि पाकिस्तान को एक हिस्सा देना था जो कई लोग कहते थे नहीं दें और पाकिस्तान बैंकरप्ट हो जाता है। तो गांधी ने कहा कि भाइयों के बीच में अगर लड़ाई भी हो तो हमें अपना जो सही है करना चाहिए। लेकिन उनके बाकी 2 मांगे बहुत महत्वपूर्ण थी। एक ये था कि कहते थे कि उस वक्त इतना ज़्यादा जो शरणार्थी आए थे, मेरा अपना परिवार भी उसमें शामिल था, वो इतना ज़्यादा दुख से भरे हुए थे कि उन्होंने कहा था कि हम जहाँ भी मस्जिद हो, जहाँ भी दरगाह हो, तो कनॉट प्लेस का जो मस्जिद है उसमें उन्होंने मूर्तियाँ रखती, मेहरौली में जो दरगाह था उसमें उन्होंने मूर्तियाँ रखी। और गांधी जी ने कहा था कि अगर मतलब आप किसी और मजहब को अपमान करते हुए अगर आप उसको भगवान का घर मानते हैं तो वो बिल्कुल गलत है। और राम मंदिर पे उनका क्या विचार होता है वो तो बहुत साफ है। तो उनकी दूसरी मांग थी कि बहुत इज्जत के साथ हम उन मस्जिद दरगाहों को अपने मुस्लिम भाइयों और बहनों को वापस करें ससम्मान। और तीसरी मांग ये थी कि कई लोग, क्योंकि अब हम पाकिस्तान से आए हैं, हमें घर की ज़रूरत है, तो घर तो वहाँ मिलेंगे जहाँ मुसलमान घर छोड़ के पाकिस्तान चले जाएं। तो कईयों को बहुत मतलब हिंसा और डर के कारण से मुस्लिम इलाकों से घरों को खाली किया गया था, वहाँ शरणार्थी घर बसे थे। उनका कहना था कि पूरे इज्जत के साथ रिलीफ कैंपों में जो हम मुस्लिम भाई बहन हैं उनको कहें कि ये आप ही का घर है, आप वापस आएं। और इरफान हबीब इसको याद करते हैं, कहते हैं कि ऐसा आदमी हो सकता है जो मेरा घर पाकिस्तान में मुसलमानों की भीड़ में जला के ख़त्म कर दिया, मैं बेघर होकर यहाँ आया हूँ, अब मैं शरणार्थी कैंप से उस जगह पहुँचा हूँ, मुझे घर मिला है क्योंकि वो मुस्लिम को मैंने भगाया है। गांधी जी कह रहे हैं कि नहीं, आप उनके पास जाइए, कहिए कि आप अपना घर वापस लें और मैं वापस शरणार्थी कैंप में जाऊंगा। इस तरह की मांग भी करना, उसकी साहस, नैतिक साहस। और उस वक्त कहते हैं कि एवरीवन, इवन नेहरू एंड पटेल सेड कि ये वक्त नहीं है, मतलब इतना ज़्यादा आक्रोश है इस वक्त, तो कम से कम ना ये मांगे रखें। गांधी का यही वक्त रखेंगे। और कहते हैं कि पहले दिन 10,000 लोग उनके पक्ष में निकले और 5वें दिन में 1 लाख लोग उनके पक्ष में निकले और उनकी मांगों को मानना पड़ा। और ये उन्होंने हमें रास्ता बताया है. And I feel that the anti-CA protest was the first time that after these 1 lakh people came out in support of Gandhiji's demands, the first time we had that kind of display of Hindu-Muslim unity in the anti-CA protests. And these are the lessons that I want to remember today that Gandhiji left for us. Thank you.
थैंक यू सो मच हर्ष, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. अब मैं साइदा जी से आग्रह करूंगी कि वो अपनी बात रखें. साइदा जी, वेलकम एंड ओवर टू यू.
Thank you so much, Rajni, and what a great pleasure and what a great honor it is to be on this platform. Ahimsa or Satyagraha as resistance in contemporary India. इसी रियलिटी पे चंद बातें मैं आपके सामने रखूंगी, पर सबसे पहले मैं ये बता दूं कि रजनी ने मुझे किताब दी थी आज से 13 साल पहले, और उसमें उन्होंने वो किताब मैं देख रही थी, और वो पीस वर्ड एक किताब थी जिसमें इस मंच पे जो है उसमें से हम 4 लोग उसमें फीचर कर रहे थे, हर्ष, अरुणा, रजनी और मैं. और हो सकता है कि और जगह होती तो सभी लोग उसमें फीचर करते. उस किताब में एक कॉन्सेप्ट था, इट वाज कॉल्ड मैड, और मैड का MAD इज द एनाग्राम फॉर म्यूचुअली एश्योर्ड डिस्ट्रक्शन. तो अब जिंदगी उस हद पे आ गई है दैट वी आर ऑन अ रोड टू म्यूचुअली एश्योर्ड डिस्ट्रक्शन. इट इज, जैसे मैंने लिखा है छोटा सा इस पे, कि इट्स बिकम अ रियलिटी ऑफ आवर डेली लाइफ, नॉट अ टर्म इन हिस्ट्री बुक्स अबाउट कोल्ड वॉर. तो गांधी जी वार्निंग जो उन्होंने एक चेतावनी दी थी कि एन आई फॉर एन आई कैन मेक द होल वर्ल्ड ब्लाइंड, ये जो उनकी चेतावनी थी, this has acquired a new sense of urgency. So this I derived from you, Rajni. And now to sort of sabko salam, namaskar, adab, sat sri akal, wonderful to be here. I wanted to, I've noted down some points, but then I happened to glance at the headlines of the Urdu paper. कभी मेरे पास वक्त नहीं होता उर्दू पेपर पढ़ने का, but I just want to just read the headline to you and then I leave the rest up to your imagination. Headline उसकी आज ये है कि धर्म संसद में हिंदू राष्ट्र बनाने के लिए करारदाद पास हो गई. That means resolution to make India a Hindu Rashtra, and the great demand to immediately set free Yati Narsinganand and one Jitendra Singh Tyagi, who's none other than Wasim Rizvi, who converted and who are now in jail in Uttarakhand, in Hardwar. But the words that sort of strike me is, जहां तक मुसलमानों का सवाल है, उसमें ये डिमांड है कि मुसलमानों को पहले रोको, फिर टोको और फिर ठोको. These 3 words, they're like 3 nails, you know. पहले रोको, फिर टोको और फिर ठोको. ये एक इलाहाबाद में, प्रयागराज में ये डिमांड, धर्म संसद में ये डिमांड आज उठी है, और आज के अखबार की मैं सुर्खी अपने हाथ में लिए हुए हूँ. I'm putting it aside. Now, जो आपका the subject of this discussion, I'm thinking of my mentors. I have many mentors, but 2 mentors who are very relevant to today's discussion. एक तो जाहिर है महात्मा गांधी हैं और दूसरे मौलाना आजाद हैं. यानी मौलाना आजाद, महात्मा गांधी और जितने हमारे सरबराह थे, उनकी रूह तड़प रही होगी जब उन्होंने ये, उनके अगर कहीं रूहें हैं और अगर कहीं दुनिया में कोई और दुनिया है, तो क्या उनकी हालत होगी ये सोच के कि उनके ख्वाबों का हिंदुस्तान में मुसलमानों को पहले रोको फिर ठोको का स्लोगन उठाया जा रहा है. I derive my inspiration from these two and other mentors. And one of the mentors, by the way, is what they have also made a demand that in that Dharam Sansad, that Subhash Chandra Bose should be declared as the Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of India. मतलब नेहरू को obliterate करके सुभाष बोस को बनाना चाहिए. ये भी एक उसकी करारदाद है. और दूसरी करारदाद which is a resolution is also कि रोहिंग्यास का जो हाल हुआ है वो मुसलमानों का हाल होना चाहिए. Anyway, that's an old story, you know about that. तो अब I'm just quoting 2 lines from the Quran, and I'd written them down in Arabic, मगर उसको मैं अंग्रेजी में ही पढ़ूंगी क्योंकि अब वक्त कम है. And what the Quran says in a surah which is Al-Mu'mineen, the surah says, and verily this ummat of yours is a single ummat. It's one people. It's a single ummat, but people have cut off their affair of unity between them into different sects. You are one ummat. You are one humanity. This is what Gandhi ji taught us, and this is what the principle of Maulana Azad. The word Islam, both emphasized, is the root is silm, which is to be at perfect peace. So this is something which I have sort of, this is what we grew up, you know, we never, like Harsh, my family was 5% of my family was forcibly put into trucks and sent across the border by order of the state. Only 5% of us were left behind, and we were left behind because we had these anchors that, like Gandhi, like Azad, like Nehru, like Subhash Bose, like Rafi Ahmad Kadwai and Shafiq Kadwai. About Anis Kadwai के बारे में अभी इन्होंने जिक्र किया था हर्ष ने. तो ये हमारे लिए मिशले राह थे. That is why we were here. We had so much confidence कि ये हमारा देश है, इसमें हमारी इज्जत है, हम इसमें अपनी जान खपाएंगे, because this is what, ये हमारा धर्म है, ये हमारा मजहब है. और बार बार हमसे कहा जाता था कि देखो, तुम्हारा मजहबी फर्ज है कि हिंदुओं के साथ मिलके और आजादी की जद्दोजहद में अपने आप को झोंक दो. ये आजादी की जो जद्दोजहद है, ये हिंदू मुस्लिम इत्तेहाद, ये लफ्ज इतना सुना था हर एक की तकरीर में. गांधी जी अपने तरीके से कहते थे, मौलाना आजाद अपनी तरीके से कहते थे, और नेहरू अपनी तरीके से कहते थे, मगर बात वही थी. अब मैं आपको 2 बात अपनी छोटी सी रखूंगी और 2 मैं आपको छोटी से 2 पढ़ के सुनाती हूँ कि गांधी ने आजाद के बारे में 1940 में महादेव देसाई की जो किताब थी मौलाना आजाद, गांधी ने लिखा, his nationalism is as robust as his faith in Islam. Islam nationalism. ये उन्होंने कहा, his nationalism is as robust as his faith in Islam, that he is today the supreme head of Indian National Congress, has a deep meaning which should not be lost sight of by any student of Indian politics. The supreme head of the party that brought freedom, he is the supreme head and we should not lose sight of it. अब मैं आपको इसके बाद, ये तो हुआ 1940, ठीक है. अब October 2, 1947 में Maulana Azad spoke about Gandhi in a radio broadcast. थोड़ी उसके 4-5 लाइनें मैं आपके सामने पढ़ना चाहती हूँ, and I have translated it into English, but I think his Urdu in Hindustani is so beautiful. उसमें मैं आपको सुना रही हूँ. ये कहते हैं कि ये हकीकत में गांधी जी की सालगिरह नहीं, अमन और इंसानियत के मकसद की सालगिरह है. लेकिन आज जब हम अमन और इंसानियत की सालगिरह मना रहे हैं, हमारे चारों तरफ क्या हो रहा है. जो अमन और इंसानियत पे, खुद अमन और इंसानियत पे क्या बीत रही है, जिस हिंदुस्तान ने दुनिया को अमन और इंसानियत का ये सबसे बड़ा इंसान दिया है, खुद उस हिंदुस्तान को खुद उस हिंदुस्तान में खुद इस हिंदुस्तान में किस तरह से खाक और खून में ये इंसानियत को मिलाया जा रहा है। पंजाब, फिर क्या कहते हैं, पंजाब में 5 दरिया पानी के हजारों बरस से बह रहे थे, अब छठा दरिया इंसान के गरम गरम खून का भी बहने लगा। 5 दरिया बह रहे थे, now there is the 6th river which is of human blood. There were 5 rivers in Punjab, अब छठा जो है वो इंसान के खून का बहने लगा है। पानी के दरियाओं पे हमने ईंट और पत्थर और लोहे के पुल बनाए, इस छठे दरिया का पुल अब इंसानी लाशों से चुना जा रहा है। इस छठे दरिया का पुल अब इंसानी लाशों से चुना जा रहा है। और फिर कहते हैं आज पूरे पूर्वी पंजाब में मुसलमानों के लिए अमन नहीं रहा, इसी तरह से पश्चिमी पंजाब में किसी हिंदू और सिख के लिए अमन नहीं है। इस दिल्ली में जहां मैं बैठा हूं, 2 हफ्ते तक जो हो रहा था उसकी याद हर गैरतमंद हिंदुस्तानी के दिल को जख्मों से चूर कर देती है। क्या क्या नक्शे थे जो हमने आजाद हिंदुस्तान के लिए नहीं बनाए, क्या क्या ख्वाब थे जो हमने कौमी जिंदगी के नई उठानों के नहीं देखे। क्या उनकी बूबास से कोई इस बदबख्त हवा में उसकी, can anyone even smell the fragrance of the dreams that we had dreamt of India? Can anyone dream, even visualize that dream in the poison that is now rampant all over? तो आखिर में मैं आपसे बस ये कहना चाहती हूँ, the question that I want to raise is that isn't this the same mahal much at a much greater level and a much greater pitch? वो जहरीली फिजा में जहर और बढ़ गया है। वो जहर जो है वो सबके एक तरह से जहर का एक दरिया बह रहा है। Now उस पे जो हम पुल बनाएंगे वो, it will not be the bridges of steel and of stone and steel and all the, but it will be the bridge of Satyagraha, it will be the bridge of Ahimsa. So I feel that when we have to now actually take that path, we have to start treading that path. After all, what do we have to lose but our lives, right? And there are young people who can definitely, but spur us along this path. But we are at the end of our lives, and we need to at this time, adopt this Ahimsa and Satyagraha. Maybe this is the route to go. Maybe this is the way to go, and this is what will, if things have reached the pitch. And I once again refer you to the resolutions made at the Dharam Sansad just earlier this morning or last night, or which have been reported. I think this is the path that Gandhi ji had laid out in front of us. बस वही एक रास्ता है, उसके लिए हमें अब प्रैक्टिकल करना है, उसके लिए हमें इस रास्ते पे हमको एक हिम्मत से, एक हौसले से, एक उम्मीद से हिंदुस्तान के लिए, अपने बच्चों के, अपने नेक्स्ट जनरेशंस के लिए उस पे हमको, उसी रास्ते को हमको अडॉप्ट करना है। बस यही बात कह के मैं अपनी बात खत्म करना चाहती हूँ।
बहुत खूब, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सैयदा जी। एज ऑलवेज आपको सुनकर इतना वो हौसला बढ़ता है, and it's always so inspiring. So thank you very much. I now invite Vijayanand ji to please share his thoughts. Vijayanand ji, over to you.
Thank you. I must confess that I'm overwhelmed by my fellow speakers and also the audience, but still, and I'm an odd man out being a bureaucrat, but still I'll try to present whatever I have understood of Gandhiji over this years, particularly trying to deal with decentralization. Everybody says Gandhiji is idealistic, but it's not unreal dreams. The clarity, the holistic thing, the evolving thing, the multidimensionality, including the spiritual and religious, how we can beautifully combine. It's not divisive and rooted in the best Indian traditions. We all are now speaking of the past, the best in the past he has distilled. And the eclectic part from Christianity, from Tolstoy, from Thoreau, Emerson, that eclecticism is something which we need to learn. And it flows out of a deep understanding of colonialism, imperialism, and internal exploitation. He understood the problems of the poor first and then built it up. So in a sense, and the whole thing, his ideas are based on experiments and experience. So to use a modern jargon, his philosophy is evidence-based, and we need to pay heed to it. And a true republican, that the individual will be the architect of his governance. And coming to Ahimsa, it's a proactive concept. It's after overcoming fear. It's not for the weak person. It's not out of fear. It is out of strength that you can achieve using that instrument. And it's a means to attain the truth. And Ahimsa is not only in relation to human beings or to the state, but in relation to nature. In that sense, there is a deep ecology in Gandhiji, which is very much relevant for 21st century with all this talk of climate change and things of that kind. So that modernity, we should still there in Ahimsa, in Satyagraha. And Satyagraha, I always feel, some kind of public action for common good, where yourself is subsumed, but individual is strong, but yourself is subsumed, and you're fighting for, and means are non-negotiable. So whatever be a noble mean, what end, it is the means. That part we often forget. Even the best Satyagrahis in the current times forget that this is the aim, so we should do whatever it is. And it is winning over the oppressor. It is not finishing off the oppressor. By reason, by even if the reason doesn't work, by suffering, and if nothing works, probably disobedience, and you can run a parallel state. So, but it's a continuous dialogue, and all the agitations had dialogues, and for an honorable settlement, but no compromise on basis. Maybe you withdraw for the time being. So those strategic principles of Satyagraha, which incorporates Ahimsa, and a whole lot of the range, starting from protest, not agreeing to a wrong, and then agitation, boycott, non-cooperation, and civil disobedience, and probably taken further would have been a parallel state. So that kind of thing is something which we need to understand. And it evolved and molded in India in response to the Indian citizen, whether it be Chambaran, Kheda, or Dandi. So we all have a lot of lessons. Now, in the current context, what do we do? So my thing is, basic principle is unacceptance of exploitation. You will not accept exploitation. We will not accept justice, injustice. We will not accept divisive hatred. Anything which divides people. We will not accept exclusion of people. We will not accept hurting the dignity of a human being. So that is the foundation of principles. And then something which is very difficult to imbibe, the higher law of our being, the unwavering voice of the conscience, which invariably would be correct. Outwardly we may rationalize, but the voice of the conscience, which is honesty, responsibility, and maturity. So some spiritual preparation we need to do. But what is the sad spectacle we are seeing now? Deep social injustice, unacceptable divides, developmental divides, regional divides, social divides, and now to add to it, make everything worse, the religious divides, artificially created and pushed. And the violence of the state. Gandhiji always believed the best state is a violent instrument, but that has become even more violent and full of, so which means there are a lot of causes for action even now. And of course, but there are issues which probably didn't exist to this level at that time. False narratives, cynicism of the good people, immoral government agencies, weakening constitutional institutions. Of course, Gandhiji was before the constitutional institution. And media, which seems to be scared, to put it very mildly. And leadership, which cannot have the moral courage to take on a wrong. That's the, I mean the political leadership. Of course, civil society is wonderful fighters. And money power, where half an hour thing will not work. It's millions. And then, unfortunately, the experience of trivializing Satyagraha by many persons over the years. So many people are cynical. But I think, I will not get into it, in detail the lessons of the farmers' movement. Gives a lot of hope. You are inclusive, non-divisive, peaceful in the face of the worst kind of attack, and then you brought everybody together, and patience and persistence. I was worried when the Republic Day incident happened, but that was an aberration, probably created by somebody else. Now, in the current scenario, a pan-Indian political movement like JP's looks impossible. That probably is the last 75, we killed it. But there are injustices of all types, small and big, in the neighborhood, in the region, in the locality. And there's a lot of passion for change. So local action through local process could be the Satyagraha of today for healing and not for conflict. And a constructive protest. I can give you one example. About 8-9 years ago, the government of Kerala, not for political reasons, pushed for some bureaucrats, tried to kill the fantastic self-help group movement of Kerala. They just wanted to kill it. Fortunately, Syeda Hameed saved it. That's a different story. And when they wanted to kill it, the women could not fight against the state. They can't fight. So I don't know, anybody told them. They started their narratives, songs, stories, novels. They read it from the SNG level, neighborhood level, up to the panchayat level and even the taluka level. And when women started reading their stories, I don't think they even meant it as a protest. It's the most constructive protest. And the persons who opposed got scared and withdrew. So they just came out into the open with their feelings. And they didn't utter a word against government. So that was one of the, like the farmers' education, something which needs to be studied. So Gandhiji's, to conclude, the 5 core principles of Gandhiji. Of course, Ahimsa, Satyagraha, I mentioned today, but you can't separate them. They are all organically linked. That's the beauty of Gandhiji. Swaraj, Swadeshi, Sarvodaya. Swaraj is local democracy. It's my area, I will not dwell on that. And Swadeshi is Khadi. And Khadi is non-violence. Khadi is Ahimsa. In a sense, Khadi is developmental Satyagraha. Look at it, local capital, local materials, local technology, low energy, easy processes, local jobs, local market, affordable, and local economic development, and continuous. And that is independence, Swaraj. So when you understand, unravel this concept. Now coming to Sarvodaya, reconstruction. It's a very difficult thing. 3 days before he was killed, Gandhiji said, the Congress has won political freedom, but they have not won economic freedom, moral freedom, and all that, because it is difficult work. It's not, he said, it's not less spectacular. It is not exciting. So to get into that is probably the challenge of today. Satyagraha and Ahimsa today should be to address these kind of constructive work, even while opposing all the demands. But we must not use this as a political management tool. There are now a lot of political management experts, even sought by the most powerful parties, but this is not there. It's a search of the innermost being and the pursuit of truth. Of course, the seeing and knowing the oppressors, I have genuine doubts about influencing them in the way I suggested. But take heart from Gandhiji's words. With truth combined with Ahimsa, you can bring the world to your feet. And trust Gandhiji, the mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction is this simple weapon. I would call it it's not weapon of mass destruction. It is a weapon of reconstruction for the masses. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Vijayanand. It's amazing that you said what you did, because the next speaker is a young man who has done his whole PhD on Khadi. He comes from a family that has worked in the Khadi and Sarvodaya tradition. And it's been a great pleasure and an honor for me that I've known Sumanas, I think about now 8-9 years, from when he started first framing his PhD proposal. So Sumanas, really delighted to invite you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Rajni. And I'm just so honored to be, on this platform. because I have grown up reading a lot of writings and work of so many people who are part of this great line of speakers. And yeah, so I just like to start with different point. So I would just like to share my own understanding of Satyagraha and its idea and its practice. And so I see Satyagraha as a non-violent method of transforming exploitative relationship into harmonious one. And this is something very essential if you really want to achieve a non-violent social order as Gandhi envisioned, or to have a democratic society. And so before getting into this idea of Satyagraha, I think it's just very important to understand how Gandhi really understood this idea of exploitation. So from my own limited reading of Gandhi, I could just think of three ways how this exploitation happens. So one is that it's just so important to understand the human nature, because he clearly understood that humans have two sides. So one is the self-interest, the other one is selflessness. And as long as when our lives are actually driven by self-interest, it's actually we end up having more and more exploitative relations. And so in other words, violence results when individuals fail to act according to their moral selves. And so this is a one very important point to understand. And the second one is he says that the conflict actually arises in the society when actually two people hold contradictory opinions, right? So this is something another very important aspect. And the third one is I really amazed when actually when I read his writings about Satyagraha, particularly when he was talking about relationship between oppressor and the oppressed. And he clearly says that in a way oppressed is also equally responsible to have an oppressive condition, because in a way he says that the degree of toleration and acceptance of exploitation by individuals in a way determines the level of violence present in a society. So hence it becomes an obligation for the oppressed to not to cooperate with the oppressor and to change the situation through non-violence. So these causes are something very important if we really need to understand the larger idea of Satyagraha. And the other important question is the idea of truth in the conception of Satyagraha, because I've spent a lot of time to just understand what he meant by truth. And finally, after reading a couple of his writings and also of his associate economist J.C. Kumarappa, so I realized that when he was talking about truth, one is that there is this relative truths that everybody holds and it actually changes over the time. But another important thing he was when he was mentioning about truth, it's actually about absolute truth. To some extent, he says that it's impossible to understand the absolute truth in its entirety, but we can actually to some extent we can understand what is this absolute truth. So he says that in a way, from my own reading of Gandhi, I think that whenever he was saying truth, when in terms of absolute, so he was really talking about this interconnectedness of life. And this something becomes a very basis for Satyagraha and a lot of his ideas of Swaraj and all other things. And so this reality or this truth, we can really realize it if we just assess our everyday life. So for example, so how does a coffee that we drink in the morning become possible, right? So if you just look at the whole backside of the coffee, you realize that there should be a plant called coffee, and there should be a honeybee or insect must have pollinated it and to produce coffee fruits, and somebody should have dried the seeds and powdered it, and someone else should have packed and sold, right? Like this. There are so many people from across different gender, religion, caste have actually contributed, and not only people, and also a lot of non-human beings too. And it clearly shows that our own existence in a way is a result of the contributions made by so many other humans and non-human beings. And this is why he really when he talks about morality, so this idea of individual good is embedded in the good of all becomes very, very important, and it actually forms the basis for Satyagraha. And so that's why when you have this kind of a moral understanding where individual good is embedded in the good of all, so it becomes inevitable as individuals to hold on to non-violence, because if you're doing some domination or some kind of a violence on others, it's nothing but a self-hindrance, right? Because our life is in a way interconnected. So this understanding becomes very fundamental. I think it forms the basis for Satyagraha. And so how does this, holding on to this understanding of truth, this interconnected of life would really, helps to deal with this causes of violence. And so interestingly, I could just, think of, 2-3 ways. So one is that this the awareness of truth, this connectedness of life, so really helps one to, resist one's self-interest, which is in a way a source of domination, right? So this is something very, very important. So when a person realizes that the other or the opponent is nothing but translation of the self, so in a way, it really encourages one to have this kind of an harmonious relationship with others. So this is something kind of a very internal struggle, I would say. And the other one is, when you hold on to this understanding of truth, it really encourages one to, understand others' viewpoint and also, reach an agreement through negotiations. So this is kind of an external struggle. And similarly, when you insist on this kind of an understanding of the truth, so in a way, it diminishes anger and hatred while encouraging the individuals to see oneself in their oppressor. And in doing so, the love, the reflection of the truth in a way becomes the medium of conflict resolution. And I would say it enables one to find mutuality with the opponent and transforms hate into voluntary suffering. So this in turn became an appeal to the moral self of the opponent and creates a way for reaching consensus. And this is something very, very important. And broadly, if you see the method of Satyagraha, another very important aspect I find very fascinating is about his understanding of connection between means and end. He says that we really not as human beings, we really don't have much control over the end. It's only about the means. So that's why as individuals, we should really should enjoy the whole process of resistance, and also so that becomes something very important. We should not really think about the end as such. And so emphasizing on means really encourages one to explore every opportunity that arises to pursue dialogue with opponent to reach an agreement. And this openness to dialogue is central for Satyagraha, I would say. And I'm really not a person to talk about the Satyagraha and its different phases, because there are so many people here who have been over this so many decades they've been into Satyagraha and non-violent resistance. But broadly, I would say, for people who are not very familiar with Satyagraha, so I can just think of 3-4 phases. The first one is kind of a negotiation phase where where we in a way explore all the available channels to reach an agreement with the opponent. And if that doesn't work out, then the second phase involves the rousing public consciousness or conscience through various media and offering a constructive solution. And the third phase is self-immolation through voluntary suffering and constant appealing to the opponent for agreement. And throughout the process, the disagreement is always should be with the opponent's action and not with the opponent himself. So this is something very important today, because every time today, when we are in the conflict, it's really we point out to the person and really not showing our disagreements with the actions that he has taken, right? So this is something I find something very, very important in Satyagraha. And the process of resistance in a way discourages individuals from criticizing their opponents in any circumstances. So that is something very, very important. Otherwise, because it breeds hostility and depart from the path of non-violence. And so in this whole non-violent struggle, so in a way I would like to say that sometimes Gandhi says that you really need to go up to the extent of even unto death in the process of appealing to the moral self of the opponent. So by saying this, I see that Gandhi really recognized this the important element of emotion in this dealing with emotions in this kind of a non-violent struggle. It's not just only about the reason, it's also about very strong emotional connections and becomes a driving force, so that it can become a reflection of non-violent resistance in exceptional circumstances. And so he gives basically a kind of 2 exceptions. So the one is that violent act is sanctioned when opponent seems to be not responding and the damages by inaction is immediate and irreversible. And so here the underlying intention of the act is of one's defense and not of rage, revenge, and oppression. And the second is violence is accepted when it is endorsed when for example a being is suffering without consciousness and recovery is out of question. So here the intention behind the act is not of self-interest, but of relieving the agony. So these are the kind of two exceptions that Gandhi says. But when he makes these exceptions, we should not think that it is in a way, we should not be skeptical about the non-violent method of resistance, but it's in a way reflect of an ordinary person's inability to conceptualize non-violent possibilities in everyday, in every possible real-world situations. So this is something very important. And apart from this larger theoretical ideas, I would like to just share a few words about Satyagraha in everyday life, because I have not been part of much larger struggles that have been put out. But I just like to talk about the importance of Satyagraha in our everyday life and how I'm trying to do in my own life in a very small way. Because here, I see that this Satyagraha has two kinds of struggle. One is which is internal, the other one is external. And this internal struggle is in a way resisting our ego, which is something very, very important. So I see that two ways as individuals we can practice Satyagraha in our everyday life. So one is that consciously trying to have a harmonious relationship with other people whom we interact, right? So this requires in a way resistance to our ego, and also providing space for others to express their views and taking decisions based on consensus as much as possible. So this is if we really try to do this in our everyday life, it really it's a great step in the whole idea of Satyagraha, I would say. And lastly, the second one is it's very important to, particularly from J.C. Kumarappa, I'm just making this point, just so important to understand this, how this violence or oppression manifests in our material relations, right? Because a lot of times we only think that it's only with the power relations, but also violence can be embedded in the material relations that we do. Because J.C. Kumarappa very clearly points out, if we as a lot of times as consumers, we purchase things in the market if it looks nice, or if the cost of the article is very low. But he says that it's very important to understand this moral dimension of it, because a lot of times a lot of the material things that we purchase it is very important to understand how these things are being produced, because a lot of times it involves a lot of violence and exploitation. So for example, the branded garments from Zara, from so many other brands, if you see, all these materials are being produced in very harsh conditions in places like Dhaka and other places.
Sumanas, I'm going to request you to wrap up a little. Yeah, if you could just
sure.
summarize. Thank you. Thank you.
So when you purchase something which is a product of, which is an outcome of exploitative social relations, in a way we would be becoming a part of that violence that's happening during the production phase. So that's why it's very important for us to purchase something which is produced locally, because that's the only way how we can trace back how things are being produced. So just purchasing something produced locally itself is an act of Satyagraha, I would say. So like this, we really need to make Satyagraha every part of our everyday life, and I think this is something very, very important. So this is just what I just wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much for covering such a wide array of issues in such depth in so short a time. So thank you very much, Sumanas, and to all our speakers, Harsh, Syeda ji, and Vijayanand ji. We will, of course, hear more from you. There is a chat box. I request any participant who would like to share a question or a reflection or make an observation to please put it in the chat box, and we'll try and address. If you have a specific question for a specific speaker, please do mention that. Now, before we go into the Q&A,
Rajni, would you like to say it in Hindi as well?
जी सॉरी बिल्कुल। तो हम अब आप सब जो शामिल हुए हैं, सभी साथी जो आज मौजूद हैं इस जूम मीटिंग में, आप अपनी बात रखना चाहें, वो सवाल हो या अपना आप दृष्टिकोण हमसे शेयर करना चाहें, तो चैट बॉक्स में उसे लिख दीजिए। और अगर किसी विशेष हमारे स्पीकर के लिए आपका सवाल हो तो जरूर उनका नाम भी बता दीजिए कि वो सवाल किसके लिए है। और अब हम एक छोटा सा संगीत का वीडियो देखेंगे जिसकी भूमिका, अरुणा जी, would you like to give the details of this? इसकी जो भूमिका है कि ये कहाँ बनाया गया?
राजस्थान में हम लोगों ने 2020 में 30 जनवरी को जयपुर में एक बहुत बड़ा एक आयोजन किया, जिसमें हम लोग सिविल सोसाइटी के लोग भी थे और सरकार ने भी उस आयोजन में भाग लिया। और हमारे सरकार ने उसकी पूरी व्यवस्था के लिए काम किया और सिविल सोसाइटी वालों ने, हम लोगों ने संगीतकारों के साथ संपर्क करके एक लोगों को बुलाया, जिसमें टी.एम. कृष्णा भी आए थे और बहुत सारे लोग, कबीर गाने वाले लोग भी आए थे। यहाँ के जो हमारे राजस्थान के लोकगीत गाते हैं वो भी आए थे। इस साल भी हमारा प्रयास तो पहले यही था कि हम सब लोग रूबरू मिले जयपुर में, but it was not possible because of Omicron. We could not organize a face-to-face meeting on the 30th of January. In fact, we had spoken to a lot of musicians and performers to come to Jaipur, but it had to be cancelled because of Omicron. But we bring you a small glimpse of what happened on the 30th of January 2020.
Meera, your audio is not working. If you could screen share and then redo it.
No, the volume has been put at minimum. Just, I think it needs to be put at max.
No, Meera, there's two options. If you unscreen share, and it says optimize for video sharing, that button. So.
सबको सहमति दे रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम ईश्वर लादे रे नाम ईश्वर 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 तेरे नाम सबको सहमति दे भगवान ईश्वर तेरे नाम सबको सहमति दे भगवान रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम ईश्वर तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
बहुत
You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us in the world and we'll live as one. We the people. Asaluk, we the people.
शुरू करें।
हाँ रजनी।
जी ओके। ललिता जी ने एक बहुत ललिता रामदास जी ने एक चैट में बड़ा खूबसूरत विचार डाला है, मैं वो पढ़ के आप सबसे शेयर करना चाहती हूँ। ललिता जी, वुड यू लाइक टू कम इन एंड स्पीक इट ललिता? अच्छा मैं पढ़ देती हूँ। As Sumana was speaking, I started imagining how I would make an approach to the leaders of the Dharam Sansad to begin a dialogue that might lead to an understanding of why they said what they did, and how would one be able to work with them to enable the process of inward reflection and create a willingness to consider the other point of view. ललिता जी का ये कहना है कि क्या हम ये संभावना को परख सकते हैं कि हम जो धर्म संसद में जैसी बातें कही जा रही हैं उनसे हम एक संवाद की प्रक्रिया को शुरू करें, इस उम्मीद में कि शायद हम उन्हें ज्यादा समझ सकें वो ऐसा क्यों कहते हैं, और उस आदान प्रदान से शायद हम कोई एक नई समझ निकाल पाए। तो मेरा आग्रह है कि जब तक हम बाकी और इस पे आप चारों में से कोई इसको रिस्पॉन्ड करना चाहेगा, अपने विचार इस पे रखना चाहेगा?
I think it's just so important to have a dialogue with those people. But I think I'm not a right person to answer this question because there are so many other people who have worked in this field. So I think someone else in the panel would be much.
Sure, Sumanas. I respect that. Yes, yes. Harsh, would you like to respond to this possibility that Lalita ji is raising?
Yes, I think there's no simple answer to this.
Yeah.
But first of all, recognize the possibility of goodness of every person. I don't classify a whole set of people as evil beyond redemption. मतलब हर एक इंसान में अच्छाई की संभावना है, ये यकीन से शुरू करना बहुत जरूरी है। एक तो ये मैं कहना चाह रहा था। दूसरा कि मुझे लगता है जो गांधी जी कई बार कहे कि माय लाइफ इज माय मैसेज, मुझे लगता है कि रिएक्ट करना इतना ज़रूरी नहीं है, बल्कि हम किस तरह से मतलब ज़िंदगी को गुजारने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, उससे वही उसी में हमारा जवाब भी होगा। और ये तर्क और जवाब के तौर पे नहीं, मतलब इट्स मच मोर फंडामेंटल। तो हमने इसका कैसे हल ढूंढने की कोशिश की, मैं उदाहरण देना चाहता हूँ। कई उदाहरण हो सकते हैं, लेकिन जब एक नफरत का दौर पूरे देश में चल रहा था और अभी भी चल रहा है, लेकिन जब लिंचिंग की जो प्रक्रिया 2016-17 से शुरू हुई, हर दूसरे तीसरे दिन हम सुनते थे कि देश के किसी कोने में एक भीड़ ने इकट्ठा होके पीट पीट के किसी इंसान की जिंदगी ले ली है। और हम देख रहे थे कि एक किस्म की खामोशी बाकी समाज में दिखती थी, बहुत कम लोग उसका विरोध करते थे। तो उसका जवाब हम कैसे दें? जैसे ललिता जी कह रहे हैं, that question troubled us a lot. How do we respond? And we felt that we have to respond to hate with an idiom and a dialogue which is based on love. How does that work? मतलब आप नफरत का जवाब आप मोहब्बत से कैसे देंगे? Just in a very concrete way. हमने तय किया कि हम उस हर एक देश के, हमने एक वादा किया और अभी भी जारी है कि देश के किसी कोने में भी अगर किसी की जान दी गई है नफरत के आधार पे, तो हम उनके पास पहुंचेंगे, उनके घर में पहुंचेंगे, उस तरह से जैसे हम अपने परिवारजन के यहाँ जाएं या अपने दोस्त के यहाँ जो इस तकलीफ से हैं। ये कहने के लिए कि आप अकेले नहीं हैं, हम आपके दुख में शामिल हैं, हम माफ़ी भी मांगना चाहते हैं कि हमारा देश किस तरह का बना है, और आपकी इंसाफ की लड़ाई में हम शामिल होंगे और हम आपकी कहानी बताएंगे। तो इसे कारवाने मोहब्बत के नाम से हमने निकाला। अब लगभग 30 यात्राएं की हैं। मैंने ये देखा है कि ये इस यात्रा की प्रक्रिया से बहुत सारे लोग जो या तो खामोश थे या कहीं किसी हद तक इस नफरत की विचारधारा से सहमत भी थे, उन्होंने उन पर प्रभाव पड़ा है। और यही तरीका मुझे लगता है कि हमें अपने विचारों पर इतना विश्वास हो, हम किसी भी हालत में, जैसे गांधी जी का वो उदाहरण मैं पहले दे रहा था कि 10 लाख लोग हिंदू मुस्लिम फसादों में, पार्टीशन में मारे गए थे, और फिर भी उन्होंने कहा, वो ये नहीं कह रहे थे कि मैं तर्क करूंगा उन लोगों से, जो उन्होंने कहा कि मैं तो इसलिए खड़ा हूं, आपको मेरी जान भी लेनी है, लेकिन मेरे हिसाब से ये देश में सबके प्रति मोहब्बत होनी चाहिए। और उसी से उन्होंने बहुत सारे लोगों का दिल जीता। और ये मतलब ये जो सवाल है ये एक बहस से हल नहीं होगा, ये एक पीढ़ी की लड़ाई है, एक पूरी पीढ़ी को इससे, it's a battle of a generation. And in the end I always ask people कि आप सही हो सकते हैं, लेकिन आप किस तरह का देश अपने बच्चों के लिए छोड़ना चाहते हैं, ये आप सोचें। और उस तरह से, और आप ये सोचें कि हम तो प्रभावशाली वर्ग के हैं, तो हमें तो किसी चीज़ का डरना नहीं है। क्या आप चाहते हैं कि आपका बच्चा नफरत के भाव से जिंदगी से वास्ता रखे? क्या ऐसी दुनिया आप चाहते हैं? तो मैंने देखा है कि प्रभाव होगा, और अंत में तो हमें अपनी जिंदगी और अपने काम से ही इसका जवाब देना जरूरी है।
I can also come in here.
जी जी, प्लीज साइदा जी, गो अहेड।
हर्ष ने बहुत अच्छी बात कही है। उनका कारवाने मोहब्बत जहाँ जहाँ गया है, they have had an enormous impact. और जिस तकलीफ में जब परिवार था वहाँ पहुँचे हैं, और उनकी जिंदगी में एक थोड़ी सी रोशनी की लकीर जरूर नमूदार हुई है। मेरा सिर्फ ये, ललिता has asked a very good question, and I think इस पे ही अगर हम थोड़ा विचार करें, मुझे ये लगता है कि एक जैसे अब मेरे घर के पास बटला हाउस हुआ, मेरे घर के पास शाहीन बाग हुआ, लिंचिंग के मौकों पे हर्ष और उनकी साथी पहुंचे, बट एक लफ्ज है, उसका नाम है, उसका वो लफ्ज है रजनी, मुनज्जम। मुनज्जम मतलब ऑर्गेनाइज्ड। इट्स ये जो आवाज उठ रही है कि मुसलमानों ने सदियों तक हमें ऑप्रेस किया है, हमें लूटा है, हमारी जिंदगी बिल्कुल तबाह और बर्बाद कर दी है। They have ruined our lives, they have ruled us, they have oppressed us. अब इनको सबक सिखाना चाहिए. So the question now, Darita, Lolly, before us, the question is, what do we do with this psyche that this kind of this convoluted logic, which in a very strange way is also very appealing? What do we do with that? Musalman is the other who is always a Taimur Lang or a Nadir Shah, or जिसने सोमनाथ लूटा, जिसने मंदिर तबाह किए. अब हमारा, this is our time, this is our Hindu Rashtra, and this is what we will achieve. We will protest, we will stand firm in this belief. जब ये एक तरह से एक दिमाग में ये साइकी आ जाती है, उस वक्त I think we all have to think what do we do? I mean, I'm a more vulnerable than some of my colleagues and friends here, but in an emotional way, they are equally vulnerable. I am physically vulnerable. Anyone can come in and anyone can shoot me, kill me, whatever. But the point is that all of you sitting here are very vulnerable, emotionally and mentally and psychologically. So what do we do with this, this thing which is seeping into the psyche of the younger generation? The Musalman who is an oppressor, who's, an object of hatred. This is the time to get them out, either Kabristan or Pakistan or any part, but, leave this pureness of our culture and our country. Just leave us. That's the point.
जी जी, मैं यहाँ कुछ जोड़ना चाहती हूँ अपनी तरफ से। 2-3 किस्से मुझे याद आ रहे हैं जो कि अहिंसा कॉन्वर्सेशन से उभर के आए। एक तो एक सज्जन है, वो सिविल राइट्स एक्टिविस्ट रहे, वो खुद वाइट अमेरिकन हैं। तो he describes how when the civil rights movement अमेरिका में हो रही थी, तो वो एक जगह पर सत्याग्रह में भाग ले रहे थे, जहां वो जिन्हें काले लोग कहा जाता है, उनके साथ वो एक जगह पे बैठे थे जहां काले लोगों को आना मना था। और एक आदमी आया जो सफेद रंग का आदमी था, जो इनके विरोध में था, और उसने छुरा ऐसे इनके डेविड के गले पे रख के कहा कि तुम यहाँ से हट जाओ, इन लोगों का साथ मत, क्योंकि डेविड खुद गोरा है, तुम हट जाओ, इनका साथ मत दो, आई विल किल यू। तो डेविड कहता है, इट्स वर्थ लिसनिंग टू एक्चुअली समटाइम्स, ही सेज, एक सेकंड के लिए मुझे लगा कि आज मैं मरने वाला हूं, पर ही सेज पता नहीं कहां से ये मेरे मन में भाव आया और मैंने उसको कहा कि ओके ब्रदर, you must do what you feel you have to do, but you should know that I will still love you. और वो कहता है कि उस आदमी के हाथ से छुरा गिर गया, छूट गया। अब देखिए, मैं नहीं कह रही हूं कि हमेशा ऐसा होगा, लेकिन एक और जो एक लड़की है जो वहां कॉन्फ्लिक्ट का काम करती है अमेरिका में, और मैं जानबूझ के दूसरे देश की कहानियां सुना रही हूँ ये हाईलाइट करने के लिए कि what we are dealing with is truly universal. Naturally, we are on a day-to-day basis, we have to be more concerned about our immediate crisis. So Nisha says she works for something called Peace Force. Hurt people hurt people. अब ये तब संभव है इसको गौर करना if we move away from whatever the specific issue is. It can be Hindu, Muslim, it can be black, white, it can be Jew and Christian or Sunni and Shia, whatever these specific dimensions are, if we are able to move back from them, step back from them, and perhaps ask ourselves, what is really hurting this other person? Now, I know it's very difficult to do. लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि ललिता जी का इशारा इसकी तरफ था कि वो संभावना खोलना कि भाई तुम बैठो और बताओ तो सही कि तुम क्यों इतने परेशान हो, छोड़ दो ये सब इतिहास वितिहास, तुम्हारी अपनी जिंदगी में ऐसा क्या हुआ है? What is your personal story that makes you so hurt, so angry, and so much committed to only living through the anger? So I just wanted to share that a lot of work is being done across the world along these lines. Maybe the most powerful way in which it has been described to me by my friend Monica Sharma, who does this conflict resolution work in different parts of the world, is she says in a nutshell, listen for the concern behind the complaint. कि जो आपको शिकायत या गुस्सा या क्रोध या घृणा व्यक्त की जा रही है, सामने आपके ऊपर वो फेंकी जा रही है, उसके पीछे चिंता या एंजाइटी या इनसिक्योरिटी क्या है? अगर हम उस पे गौर करें तो कई दरवाजे खिड़कियां खुलते हैं। हम इस पे कैसे काम करें? अब perhaps we can address that to a bit, or we can move on. Actually, I must say कि मुझे ज्यादा समय नहीं लेना चाहिए क्योंकि और कई सवाल हैं। प्रोफेसर हरगोपाल कह रहे हैं, मैं इंग्लिश में ही पढ़ती हूँ, प्रैक्टिसिंग
खुद बोल सकते हैं क्या? उनके माइक
जी अरुणा बोलिए ना।
नहीं, हरगोपाल, प्रोफेसर हरगोपाल खुद
हाँ,
माइक
जरूर जरूर। प्रोफेसर साहब, would you like to come in? Professor Hargopal, inviting you to please speak and share your question in audio.
No, that question was from my, wife. But anyway, the basic question, as Harshmander was saying, unless we present an alternative vision of future society, a powerful vision of a humane, democratic society, I have a feeling that it's very difficult to inspire people. My own experience in the civil rights movement, and when we interact with different sections, when you put your discourse in terms of humanistic terms, what is a human being, how humanization process takes place, what will be future human being, how humane, how pleasant, how participative, how egalitarian the future society would be, and then tell them the violence that they are suffering in their personal life, in social relations and all. This violence has to be explained not in a macro term, but in the micro, then we have to go to macro. Perhaps, the individuals, the human nature, when you raise basic questions about human nature, the nobility and also the wickedness of the human nature, then Gandhi had that a notion, a conception of a society, a decentralized, participative society, an economy which is not exploited. Gandhi had a conception of society. Maybe that part of Gandhi has to be resurrected. And now we have to explain Gandhi in terms of a critique of neoliberalism, then the resistance to that neoliberalism. Perhaps our entire terms of discourse in a situation which is becoming extremely violent, and the sadhus who are supposed to be have renounced the world and have gone in search of the divine, in saffron dress says that all Muslims should be eliminated. I think, what is the role of religion? What does religion has a moral dimension? Every religion has a strong moral dimension. But somebody, saying that, going that far, I think it disturbs you. It upsets you, disturbs you. But then the way we have to dialogue with the society, I think, is a new human being, a new human society, and a society where all of us will live in harmony. And I think perhaps Gandhi has to be brought back. I wrote, I gave some lectures on Gandhi endowment lecture. I was very critical of Gandhi 30, 40 years back. But I would definitely like to revisit Gandhi now as the situation is unfolding itself. So I think I would go with Mander and friends, as Hamida ji said, that we have to now talk to the society in terms of a humane, noble, participatory, a wonderful society, a wonderful future society. Nandini Sundar has done it. And Chhattisgarh, Naxal movement, when she wrote that book, the last chapter presents a dream. And so inspiring. A society at Chhattisgarh where people are dancing, singing, and people are confident, people live meaningfully. That type of powerful presentation perhaps is the need of the hour. This is the comment I would like to. Because my wife was telling that if human beings, the self-interest is the cause of violence, those who are fighting, they should be able to overcome self-interest. If they overcome the self-interest, then only they will have the ability to fight with those who are driven by self-interest. That is what was her reflection when she was listening to me. Thank you, Aruna, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Professor Hargopal. There is another question. I think हमें कुछ साथियों को म्यूट करना पड़ेगा जी. एक विद्या वेंकट का सवाल है, मैं उसके पहले अंग्रेजी में ही पढ़ती हूँ. My question to the panelists today: in India, Gandhian tactics of resistance are being employed widely as a legitimizing strategy by social movements, but often without the serious intention of seva or service, as Gandhiji had emphasized. What do our panelists have to say about that? This is a question from Vidya Venkat. Would
हिंदी
हाँ कि गांधी जी का जो आग्रह था अहिंसा के बारे में और सत्याग्रह के बारे में, वो सेवा से बहुत जुड़ा हुआ था और अंतिम जन की सेवा. तो इनका सवाल ये है, पहले तो उनकी एक टिप्पणी है कि आज जो है गांधी जी के बताए हुए तरीके तो कई लोग इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं अपने मूवमेंट के लिए और अपने संघर्ष के लिए, लेकिन सेवा पर कम जोर है, ऐसा इनका कहना है और वो इस पे आप सबकी राय चाहती हैं. ये विद्या वेंकट जी का सवाल है. एक्चुअली विद्या जी, ये आपका सवाल इस पैनल के साथियों पर तो लागू नहीं होता क्योंकि सभी
But-
बहुत किस्म की सेवा के लिए मशहूर है,
No,
but
I
still,
was actually thinking about a lot of political movements which use dharna and pradarshans as strategies to draw attention towards their politics.
जी,
But they are not focusing on the service aspect. Especially, you know, I had a few political movements in mind in recent times, in the last 10 or
जी, जी,
15 years. We've seen that they do these street protests, you know, they go and lie down in front of some office because it's very, a lot of people are just using it in a very fashionable way to, because it's good to say that, you know, we are doing Gandhian politics, but to what extent they are involved in seva or,
जी,
you
जी,
know,
जी. If I may respond to one just as a factual input, across the world, Vidya ji, many different types of movements have actually chosen to de-link the two things. There are situations in which an important right, an important struggle for justice is in itself a kind of seva to those who are being oppressed by the injustice. And while Gandhiji, the spirit of what Gandhiji was saying at that time in the context of the Indian freedom struggle is very important. I'm not in any way underestimating that. What I'm just sharing with you that in this 70 years, and when there have been so many movements which have chosen the path of non-violence rather than violence, they have to some extent, I think, well, quite satisfactorily de-linked the two things. Now, many of the same people may also be engaged in some kind of service. वो और कहीं सेवा में भी शायद लगते हों. I'll give you a simple example. रोजा पार्क्स ने जब उस बस में अपनी सीट बदलने से इनकार किया, तो उसका कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि वो कहीं जाके किसी की वो ऐसे फिजिकल सेवा करती थी कि नहीं. उनके उस एक एक्शन से इतिहास बदला. उससे बड़ा क्या सेवा हो सकती है? रोजा पार्क्स की कहानी बतानी चाहिए अरुणा, कि वी कैन अज्यूम
संक्षेप में जल्दी से.
जी, रोजा पार्क एक रंग, मतलब शी वाज अफ्रीकन अमेरिकन, और वो एक सीट पे बस में बैठी थी जो सो कॉल्ड काले लोगों के नाम की सीट थी. लेकिन क्योंकि बस भर गई तो एक सफेद आदमी आया और उसने कहा तुम्हें उठना पड़ेगा क्योंकि पहले सफेद लोग बैठते हैं. तो उसने कहा नहीं, मैं नहीं उठूंगी. और उसके एक उस ना कहने से एक पूरे संघर्ष को ताकत मिली. तो वो इसलिए मशहूर है इस बात के लिए. और मेरा दावा ये है कि इससे बड़ी क्या सेवा होगी.
अच्छा, प्रफुल्ल is saying something very pertinent.
जी, हर्ष भी कुछ कह रहे हैं. आप किसका जिक्र कर रही हैं अरुणा?
प्रफुल्ल समंतराय
जी, ओके. बट हर्ष आई थिंक इस पे कुछ रिस्पॉन्ड करना चाहते हैं, फिर हम प्रफुल्ल पे चलते हैं. जी हर्ष.
बहुत संक्षिप्त में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि पहले के एज अ प्रिंसिपल, you know, it's not specific to what you're doing. I think we have to recognize that work for justice is emptied out of meaning unless it is founded in compassion. But equally, work for compassion gets emptied out of meaning if it is not founded on a notion of justice. मतलब मैं कह रहा हूँ कि ये एक मतलब specifically रोजा वो उस वक्त में उन्होंने किया या नहीं किया, पर एक अप्रोच कि अगर हम इंसाफ के लिए लड़ रहे हैं तो इंसानियत पे हमारा बुनियाद इंसानियत रहे, और अगर हम करुणा से संबंधित काम करें तो इंसाफ के मुद्दों से कभी मतलब टूटे नहीं. ये पर मुझे to Vidya, I would want to say more fundamentally, I think that the understanding, I wouldn't call most of those protests Satyagraha, because Satyagraha had certain principles. If there is an unjust law, then I have the right as well as the duty as a concerned citizen to disobey. But disobeying that unjust law, इसमें कोई शर्त नहीं. मतलब अगर मुझे लगता है कि ये कानून या ये सरकार का ये काम गलत है, नाइंसाफी है उसमें, तो मेरा हक भी है, मेरा फर्ज भी है कि मैं उसका विरोध करूं। तो पर उसके कुछ तरीके होते हैं, उन्होंने कुछ शर्तें रखी। पहले के मैं खुल के विरोध करूं, मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि मैं चुपचाप फिर तो हम लोग करते ही रहते हैं, नहीं, हम खुल के हम कह रहे हैं कि हम इससे असहमत हैं, इसको हम विरोध कर रहे हैं। और दूसरा जो और भी ज्यादा जरूरी है कि हमारी मांग होनी चाहिए कि जब, क्योंकि मैं आपका कानून का विरोध कर रहा हूं, उसका सजा मुझे मिलनी चाहिए, और मेरी मांग है, मेरी जिद है कि मुझे ये सजा मिले, तभी और मैं तब तक करता रहूंगा, मैं सजा लेता रहूंगा जब तक आप उस कानून को बदलेंगे नहीं। उस तरह का सिविल डिसोबीडियंस या सत्याग्रह मैं समझता हूँ कि इसके बहुत कम उदाहरण हैं, and we should hold on to that value. I had a big dilemma during the anti-CA protest. I had no idea कि it would grow into a big movement. तो उस दिन, जिस दिन ये पास हुआ था, मैंने सोशल मीडिया में लिखा, एक लेख भी लिखा कि ये वक्त है जब हमें इसका विरोध करना है, सिविल डिसोबीडियंस का वक्त है। लेकिन प्रॉब्लम यह है कि मैं विरोध करूं, अगर मैं कहूँगा कि मैं डॉक्यूमेंट्स नहीं दूंगा, मैं कागज नहीं दूंगा, लेकिन मुझे कोई तकलीफ नहीं होगी, कानून ऐसा बना है क्योंकि मैं मुस्लिम नहीं हूं तो मुझे तो कोई सजा नहीं होगी, तो मेरी तो सत्याग्रह अपूर्ण रहेगा। इसलिए मैंने कहा कि अगर ये कानून पास हो और सरकार पूछे हमारा मजहब और उसके आधार पे वो कार्रवाई करे, तो मैंने कहा कि मेरा सत्याग्रह तब पूरा होगा जब मैं इन सिविल रिकॉर्ड्स में आई विल रजिस्टर एज मुस्लिम, then I will not give the documents, and then I will demand कि अगर मेरे किसी मुस्लिम भाई या बहन को आपने नागरिकता से हटाया है तो मेरी भी जिद है कि मुझे भी हटाया जाए। तो सत्याग्रह एक बहुत मुश्किल रास्ता है और हमें उसके सारे सिद्धांतों को समझना जरूरी है।
Actually, I just quickly wanted to give.
Sorry,
one or
Vidya.
two-
Sorry, no, Vidya.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We won't have the opportunity
Okay.
here for a direct dialogue, but please
Okay.
do reach out to Harsh.
Sure,
Prafulla
sure.
ji, would you like to please share your Prafulla Sumantra ji? आप अपनी बात कहिएगा ना।
Thanks, Rajni ji. I have nothing to speak more. But I would like to say that people like us, whether it's Aruna Rai or Harsh Mander or myself, or many people, those are with the people's struggle, that is the Satyagraha. When we share with this struggle also, we share with the pains of the distressed people and marginalized people. And even those people are in turmoil and in also the depression, that we share the pain and also organize how to feed their family, how to help them in court, how to bring the justice to them, how to. So this is also the service interlinked with this also. It is a wide spectrum of activities that makes Satyagraha a success. Satyagraha means not only sitting in the to be part of this process. Now, even within 1 minute I'm speaking. Now in Odisha, after POSCO was thrown out, now the government of Odisha has brought to another Indian company, and within 15 days now, the people of Dhinkia are being beaten by police, arrested, jailed, and women are in distress. The police is not leaving the village, and we people like people else, you are going there, how to feed their family, how to make them free from this torture. So taking all these united efforts are going on. So this is also a service to the humanity. I think whoever made it is to be with the people's people struggle is also service to humanity. That is my point.
जी, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। तो अब हमारे पास करीब 12-13 मिनट बाकी हैं, तो अगर अरुणा जी की सहमति हो तो मेरा सजेशन है कि अब हम और क्वेश्चंस ना लें और हम अपने चारों गेस्ट्स को, मेन स्पीकर्स को ये रिक्वेस्ट करें कि वो अपने एक किस्म के रैप अप कमेंट्स दें, जिनमें मेरी एक रिक्वेस्ट है कि इफ यू कुड perhaps focus on what are some of the inner strengths that young people today can cultivate, or that they could focus on cultivating, which would enable them to walk the path of non-violent resistance. के नौजवानों के लिए आप क्या सुझाव देंगे कि वो क्या अंदरूनी अपने भीतर, अपने जहन में ऐसी क्या ताकतें वो तैयार करें, मानसिक और मतलब बौद्धिक, कि वो ये अहिंसा के, सत्याग्रह के, मतलब अहिंसा से लोकतंत्र और यूनिवर्सल डिग्निटी के लिए लड़ने के मार्ग पर वो चल पाए। तो shall we go in reverse order, Sumanas? And मेरी request है कि we'll all have to be brief so that we can wrap up at about 7. Thank you.
Rajni, can I come first?
Please, Syeda ji, go ahead.
Sent you a message saying that I have doctor's consultation.
Please do. Please go ahead.
Very ill. So
जी.
मैं अपनी बात तो बिल्कुल 1 मिनट में रखना चाहती हूँ. It has got मैं तो 2 couplets आपके सामने रख रही हूँ. बस, that's all. It's for Gandhi ji, it's for Satyagraha, and it's for Ahimsa. और ये कलाम है सीमाब अकबराबादी का
जी.
और वो ये कहते हैं कि मैंने ए हिंद फिदा की अपनी जान तेरे लिए, मैंने ए हिंद फिदा की अपनी जान तेरे लिए, ना तवा मीन्स हड्डियों वाला जो बहुत ही कमजोर होता है, मैंने ए हिंद फिदा की अपनी जान तेरे लिए, ना तवा सीने पे खाई गोलियां तेरे लिए, मैंने आजादी की मंजिल पर तुझे पहुंचा दिया, मैंने आजादी की मंजिल पर तुझे पहुंचा दिया, वक्फ कर दी अपनी जिस्म जान तेरे लिए, है रवां ये जिंदगी का कारवां तेरे लिए। और इसके बाद वो ये कहते हैं कि जवाब इसका कौन दे, ये किसका खून बह गया, ये कौन जाते जाते दिल का राज सबसे कह गया, जवाब इसका कौन दे कि खुद हमारे हाथ इस लहू में है रंगे हुए, ये कौन कत्ल हो गया, ये कौन जाते जाते जिंदगी का राज सबसे कह गया, जवाब इसका कौन दे कि खुद हमारे हाथ इस लहू में है रंगे हुए। यही सेंटिमेंट्स हैं, यही लेसन है और यही हमारे लिए मुस्तकबिल के लिए, फ्यूचर के लिए यही उनका पैगाम है कि जिससे हमारा रास्ता जो है उसमें रोशनी बिखर सकती है। These are just some lines of poetry. Sorry for all the Urdu and Hindi and Hindustani I have foisted on you. These are just lines of poetry, but I don't have time to translate. And I really thank you for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity. Brings tears to my eyes. It makes me want to live when I feel that maybe I should, that's it, one call it a halt, call it a day. हो चुका बहुत कुछ. Thank you, Rajni. Thank you.
नहीं, आपने हमें सबको इतना प्रेरित कर दिया, हम आपका कैसे शुक्र करें ये नहीं समझ आता. And not just for what you said here, but who you are and what you do all the time, Syeda ji, we can only bow to that. So thank you. Thank you so much. Ji. Sumanas, would you like to share your thoughts in response to what I was asking or to any other aspect of the discussion? Please don't feel limited by what I suggested.
No, I think the very important thing is to how we can encourage youngsters to understand this larger connections that we have as individuals. I think that is something very important. And in my life itself, I started appreciating Gandhi's ideas only, after I got into ecology and environmental issues. I think that is another way how we could actually, through environmental education could be an very important tool, particularly into, making people understand this larger connections and to, have this kind of an empathetic relationship with others. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you and all the best to you. Vijayanand ji, can I request you to share your...
When I interact with youngsters, particularly college students, I'll confine to that. I find them a little more individualistic than my era, but they're less hypocritical. And they want evidence. They will not accept stories. So when we are able to give them evidence, what we are talking today is not story. They are what happened. And when you give them, then I'm sure as a counterpoint, they will understand and respond. And something which Sumanas also hinted, mentors. I see the 100 person sitting here could be real mentors, and youngsters can relate to them and move in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. हर्ष, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे in an overall response to what we were discussing? जी, please.
पहले तो मुझे लगता है कि जो प्रोफेसर हरगोपाल ने कहा था उसको मैं दोहराना चाहता हूँ कि बंधुता, फ्रेटर्निटी, इंसानियत पर आधारित समाज की हमारी कल्पना क्या है, इस कल्पना को हमें मजबूत करना होगा। नौजवानों बहुत अच्छी तरह से समझते हैं और ये सवाल बार बार पूछने में मुझे बिल्कुल वो बातचीत होती है कि आपके बच्चे हैं या जो बच्चे होंगे, आप कैसी दुनिया में उनको बड़ा करना चाहते हैं। आई थिंक दिस इमेजिनेशन ऑफ अ different kind of society, I think is one very important step. Very quickly, secondly, I do feel that the courage of resistance is something that we need to stress upon, and like Syeda ji, not nearly as proficiently as her, there's a couplet that I wanted to read out by Allama Iqbal. जहाँ में अहले ईमान सूरत खुर्शीद जीते हैं, जहाँ में अहले ईमान सूरत खुर्शीद जीते हैं. That means in this world, people of goodness live like the sun. And how do they live? इधर डूबे उधर निकले, उधर डूबे इधर निकले. They set here, then they rise there. They set there, they rise here. I think that we have, this is a long battle. This, to rebuild our society on the, on the lines of fraternity, humanity, compassion, we have to fight a long battle and be like the sun. Idhar doobe, udhar उठे, उसी तरह से रहे.
बहुत खूब, Harsh. And when you say that, we all feel like doubly energized, because that's what you live all the time. Mr. Fali Nariman is also with us today. Can I please request him to say a few words before we wrap up this meeting, sir? वो unmute कर रहे हैं. No, sir, you're still on mute. Can you please help? Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, sir. Please, pleasure.
Yeah, I'm quite fascinated with the entire discussion, and I am somehow, although I'm a bit. My wife always told me I'm a pessimist. She was an optimist, but I am a little pessimistic, and my pessimistic approach to the problems that all of you have been discussing today is this: can we not tell people who indulge in hate speech and hate from their hearts that, do you believe in what the Constitution thinks is one of the most important, 5 most important things in this country? Fraternity. You see, our Constitution in its preamble speaks of justice, equality, liberty, and fraternity, which was added particularly by Dr. Ambedkar, the father of the Constitution, as it were. And I personally think that it would be very difficult for anyone in a matter of discourse to say, I don't believe in fraternity, to hell with you. You have to say, I do believe in fraternity. Well, if you do believe in fraternity, then let us fraternize with your speech. I don't call it hate, but your own way of dealing with things. And my way, I don't call it love, but my own way of dealing with things. And perhaps that there is some meeting ground between the two. And after that, perhaps, if goodwill prevails, unfortunately, there's no goodwill, there's a lot of ill will. If goodwill prevails, there may be some hope. But as you rightly pointed out, it's for the younger people now to take up cudgels. The younger Muslims, the younger Hindus, the younger Sikhs, if they particularly think that India cannot possibly live in a spirit of hate for the good of the country, not for the good of Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs, for the good of the country, then perhaps we may have a little bit of light shed on this very, very difficult, very, very abstruse sort of topic. That's my only contribution.
No, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us and for making this contribution with your comments. So we are now, we are out of time, and I thank all the guests and all the participants from my side first. SFD will now thank everyone from formally, and I thank the SFD for giving me the opportunity to be part of this gathering. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. And over to, I think, Nawaz of SFD.
Nawaz, before you thank everybody, I just want to take 1 minute.
1 minute. Aruna.
May I, with Rajni's permission and Nawaz's permission?
Yes, please,
Yeah.
Aruna.
I'm an activist, and I feel that I want to make a call on the 31st of January, 2022. And I feel there are very strong emotions for peace and for non-violence in many, many parts of this country and in many parts of the community. But I think what we have not provided systematically and continuously is a platform. So I feel that those of us who are activists will now have to look at peace and non-violence as an issue which will bind us across the country. So I have a slogan, Hinsa abhi nahi, kabhi nahi. I think when Eve Ensler made a call against the violence on women, she said, enough, no violence, on women's bodies. And 1 billion women all over the world rose to state that there should be no violence. I think we need all of us to rise and say in one voice in this country, no matter where we are located, Hinsa nahi, abhi nahi, kabhi nahi. And I think it will catch, because many of us do not want this violence. We do not want to live in this kind of malevolent society, but we feel alone, and we feel we don't have the courage to stand alone. And I think what we need to absolutely agree with Fali, that we need fraternity, we need, with Harsh, that we need bandhuta and a community. I agree with Vijay that we need to look at various issues, with Sumanas, with all the other speakers, with Lolly. And I feel, importantly enough, we must make this call. And if the 100 of us who've been here today agree to this, and many who are watching this on the other platform, I think we can make a call. And let's hope that if we take a big call for non-violence and for solutions to be made across dialogue and at a table, maybe we can begin. And I feel in my bones somewhere that we are ready for it. So I want to thank all of you very much for participating in it, but Nawaz will do the formal thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everybody on the panel today. Would like to thank you with your names, Harshji, Syeda-ji, Vijayanand-ji, and Sumanas. Thank you so much for joining, and Rajni-ji for moderating it beautifully. And also, I would like to thank Aruna-ji for pushing SFD to do this. Getting everybody on the panel today was her idea. And couple of beautiful couplets, which Harshji and Syeda-ji's recitation, I think those are would be the highlight for me personally to take away today evening, and something for each and every one over here watching on this platform as well as the other platform to think about. Some of Gandhiji's contributions. We talked to our fellows participants at SFD. His talisman is something something that we read every time with our participants. And I personally have always wondered the power of a human being who was able to, in his times, control riots, and the kind of India that we have seen now in our capital. If we have riots, there are riots everywhere in India. It's so polarized, it's so unequal as a society right now. I think Gandhiji is definitely a person we can look to for inspiration and for hope. With that, I'd like to once again thank all the speakers, Harshji, Syeda ji, Sumanas, Vijayanand ji, Rajni ji, Aruna ji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sabha. Thank you, Namaz. Aruna,
Thank you, Rajni. Thank you, Harsh.
Thank you. Thank you very
Vijayanand.
much.
Thank you, Syeda.
Bye.
She's not here, and Sumanas. Thank you very much
Yes.
indeed.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks
you.
very much.